Okay, good. All right, 1 minute after, I think we can get started. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are calling in from. I'd like to say aloha because I'm actually participating from Honolulu, Hawaii. Welcome to our third annual Rotary Peace Corps Week, day number 2, which is Tuesday, the 19th of September, 2023. And basically, the work that we'll be doing today is how to make Rotary and Peace Corps connections work. Please note that this will be recorded and the recording for the session will be made available in a few days' time. My name is Alan Kusunoki, and I will be your moderator for today. And Charlie here, you see on the screen, will be monitoring the chat, collecting all your questions. I hope that you will keep this in a loose manner. I mean, if you have a question, please put it into the chat and we'll be glad to address it when we get to that time. A bit about myself. I myself am a returned Peace Corps volunteer, having served in Afghanistan, as you can see in the title under my photo here. And I am also vice president of the Returned Peace Corps Volunteers of Hawaii. And also, probably the most important thing, as a Rotarian, I am a member of and past president of the Rotary Club of Hilo, which is located on the Big Island of Hawaii, for those of you who know the islands here. First of all, I'd like to thank those of you who participated in yesterday's program, our day 1 program, when we had the very good fortune of having 2 excellent speakers. We had former Peace Corps Director Jody Olson, PhD, and Rotary International Vice President Pat Meriwether Argis. And it was really a good section. I found it inspiring and very informative, and I hope you did too. Today, our topic is really outreach, trying to find ways in which Rotary can connect better with Peace Corps and vice versa, Peace Corps connecting with Rotary. And we'll be going through a few of the different things that we have done in that area. Let's see. Oh, yes. And of course, this is partnering for peace, which is exactly about that, where Rotary and Peace Corps combine and become partners. Let me first introduce you to Charlie and tell you a little bit about him. I'm sure when he starts talking, he will give you more information. From what I have, Charlie is a returned Peace Corps volunteer, also having served in Vanuatu. He is a member and past president of the Rotary Club of Denver Lodo and a past president of the Returned Peace Corps Volunteers of Colorado. Most importantly, he is one of the charter members who helped to start Partnering for Peace. Very important accomplishment as far as I'm concerned. So, Charlie, how about telling us a little bit about how you and Steve Warner, who was on last night, how you started all this, but perhaps tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be a volunteer, a Rotarian, and then a Partnering for Peace charter member. Charlie.
Thanks, Alan. Glad to be here. To give you a little background on myself, I served as a Peace Corps volunteer. I became interested after I found a link at the Peace Corps website some years ago, and it said on its homepage that a Peace Corps volunteer had just celebrated his 80th birthday during service. I turned to my wife and said, "They take old people." And from that point, it was never why we couldn't serve, but what we needed to do to make that possible. The year before, in 2005, I'd become a Rotarian in the Utica, New York Rotary Club after a friend of mine, Catherine McEnroe, had twisted my arm long enough and hard enough that I couldn't say no any longer. And I half-kiddingly say that I took the motto service above self a little too seriously and became a Peace Corps volunteer. During service, I was a business enterprise volunteer working with a dysfunctional rural fishermen's cooperation. They knew how to fish, but they didn't know how to run a business. And I knew how to run a business, but I didn't know how to fish. So it was a perfect match for learning. After returning to the United States in 2008, we settled in Denver, Colorado, due to family and grandkids and that type of thing. And I became a member of the Denver Rotary Club. A few months later, as we got to July and we had a new club president, the incoming president asked me to become the international service chair, of course. And I said, what do I have to do? And that set me on a path of talking to other international service chairs in District 5450, and ultimately meeting Steve Werner and Sue Fox. And if you were on the call last night, you had an opportunity to meet Steve Werner if you hadn't already. Like me, they were Rotarians who had served as Peace Corps volunteers. And they had recognized that what both Peace Corps and Rotary areas of focus were almost identical, and that a partnership agreement could be in their best interest. After promoting this idea with both organizations, they came to the first agreement in 2015 and have renewed it since then. Sue and I patted ourselves on the back after that first partnership work had been signed, thinking like our work is done. But Steve, in his great wisdom, said, oh no, it's just beginning. This prompted the forming of Partnering for Peace, Friends of Peace Corps and Rotary in 2017 to give an organizational focus to promoting the partnership at the grassroots level. In essence, the partnership was between two organizations that kind of operate at 30,000 feet. But how do you actually make that work at the grassroots level? Partnering for Peace has been meeting with the partnership leads for both Peace Corps and Rotary International almost monthly since the formation of Partnering for Peace to strategize on how to promote the partnership at the grassroots level. One of the main challenges is connecting with Peace Corps volunteers with Rotarians. And it's kind of, I think, up to us to make those connections happen. Due to the fact that Peace Corps is very focused on the security of all the Peace Corps volunteers, they can't share with us who is going overseas so that we can start to make those connections with Rotary clubs before they go overseas. And that's where it all falls to us as Rotarians. And I always say when I'm doing presentations about this topic, we have large networks. We know a lot of people. We have a lot of friends. So I would ask all of you to think about when you're having conversations with people and someone says, oh, my son's going into Peace Corps, or my daughter's going into Peace Corps, or someone else in our community is going to Peace Corps. Make the effort to connect with them and get them connected back into your club to start that connection between Peace Corps and Rotary International. One of the things that my club did a few years ago is that we started a satellite group in our club with the intention that it would have a different due structure and that we could attract Returned Peace Corps volunteers to it. And it was quite successful. We over doubled the size of membership in our club by doing that. So something to think about. Alan, how did you get involved with Partnering for Peace?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you're the man, as it were. I as I recall it, and I know our memories get a little fuzzy there. But a past district governor from Hawaii was at an international convention, a Rotary International convention, and met you. And of course, the subjects eventually came around to Peace Corps and actually partnering for Peace too. And she came back home and said, Alan, you have to contact Charlie. So I did. And just in the short conversation that we had, I mean, I was into it totally. I mean, I thought, of course, Rotary, Peace Corps, it's just an automatic partnership. It should be that way. And of course, my background in Peace Corps um, told me a lot about cooperating and working with other people. Um, I when I joined Peace Corps and I ended up being told I'm going to Afghanistan, one of the first things that went through my mind was the language barrier, or maybe not a barrier if I made sure that I learned the language well. For me, it was always getting to know people, talking to them one on one. I think it's just the way I am. I talk to a lot of people. I meet new people, and I don't hesitate to introduce myself and make friends. And actually, I ended up going to Afghanistan as what they said I would be a water supply engineer. And that is one thing I don't know anything about. I had my degree in civil engineering, but it was not in the area of water supply. When I got there, because I had learned the language very well, which is called Dari, I started to make friends with a lot of the Afghan nationals who became my counterparts or workmates in the Central Authority for Housing and Town Planning. And one Afghan gentleman said, you really ought to meet this new guy who's come in from the United Nations. He was a building engineer from India who had been asked by the United Nations to start or write the first building code for Afghanistan. That was fascinating to me, and so I had to meet him, and I was introduced to him, and sure enough, when we started chatting, in the next sentence, he just said, come work with me. I said, but I'm a Peace Corps volunteer. We can work that out. So it ended up where we had to get special permission, but we did. And soon we were on our way. We traveled all over the country looking at construction methods, picking up samples of building materials, bringing them back to Kabul and testing them at the university labs. And once we had the data, accumulating the data and do drawings, write the code. And I was worried that we wouldn't be able to finish it within the 2 years' time, but we did. And it actually changed my whole life. I never thought that I would ever do this when I was at the university. But when I came back, I ended up in Omaha, Nebraska. That firm sent me to Singapore, then to Hong Kong, and I lived in Southeast Asia for about 9 years, uh, working in various Southeast Asia countries, and then returned to Los Angeles and stayed there for about 10 years. And then again, circumstances changed, and I was on my way to come back home to Hawaii, but not Honolulu, where I was born, but to Hilo. I got to Hilo, and one of the first things that I would do, of course, is as I met people, I mentioned I had served in the Peace Corps. Everyone I talked to said, "Did you know?" or asked, "Did you know that Peace Corps had a training center here?" And I said, "What?" Apparently, in the early 60s and 70s, Peace Corps had a training center located at the University of Hawaii at Hilo, and they used parts of the Big Island to send volunteers to train. And I was amazed, but it led me to meeting some of these volunteers who, after their service, loved Hilo so much, they returned to Hilo and stayed. They formed a little group, just an association, nothing formal. And soon they were having potluck dinners, picnics together. And I wanted in on that. So I signed up and put my email address and everything down. And soon I was immersed in meeting a lot of Returned Peace Corps volunteers there. And that, of course, then led me to Rotary. And I joined the Rotary Club of Hilo. And from there, I just got totally immersed in Rotary, Peace Corps, and it was just a natural fit. We thought alike as far as I was concerned. Service above self became normal, and just talking about what we did overseas and the differences of how it is to live overseas, away from the US. And well, I just continued to do that until, I met you, Charlie, and brought me into Partnering for Peace. And at the same time, when I retired, I moved back to Honolulu and joined the Returned Peace Corps Volunteers of Hawaii, and currently serve as vice president there. And you'll hear from our president later on in this session. I now would introduce you to Ellen Young, our vice chair for outreach. And Ellen, perhaps you can tell us your arrival in Peace Corps is a little bit different. You're really more a Rotarian. So tell us about how you came to work with Partnering for Peace.
Well, thanks very much, Alan and Charlie, for getting us started. Yes, he's right. Although I am not a returned Peace Corps volunteer, my daughter Sarah is, having served in the Dominican Republic in 2007, 2008. So that makes me a Peace Corps mom. So through and through. But I've been a Rotarian for over 30 years, joining in 1991, with most of my service focused on grants and humanitarian service. The Youngs are a Rotary family, with Sarah and her sister, Catherine, both experiencing Rotary through short-term summer international exchanges. So when Sarah called one rainy night from the Dominican Republic to ask if Rotary might support a literacy project in her assigned village, she knew that I would immediately get my own Rotary Club involved in funding and supporting the project. The small international grant of $13,000 funded equipment, shelves, and books to build a library in the community's primary school. After her Peace Corps service, Sarah stayed in touch with her connections in the Dominican Republic especially with the school officers in the high school, which resulted in another $22,000 grant to build a computer lab and library in the high school. Within a few years, with the assistance of the Chicagoland Korean Club and a district in South Korea, libraries and computer labs were created in several other communities with over $90,000 in total grant impact. And since that project was completed, both Rotary clubs and the Peace Corps have independently, going back to this project, it was an amazing project to try to collaborate not only with clubs in my own district, but clubs around the world. And it was really the beginning for me of getting much more involved in global grants. But since then, both Rotary and the Peace Corps have independently developed their own principal areas of focus, areas of interest, many of which we realized overlap. So this makes collaboration together straightforward and easy. But the challenge now is to find each other and to make the connections which will allow the collaboration to blossom. And as you can see from the slide here, which is a side-by-side listing of what we do independently, you can see that when we do a project, we are often working towards exactly the same goals and trying to solve very, very, very similar problems. This spring, Alan and I developed a contact list of all the US-based district governors and district governors-elect to communicate information about partnering for peace throughout the US Rotary network. Each US district governor and their governors-elect was asked to seek help from their district's clubs in identifying returned Peace Corps volunteers, also known as RPCVs, in their communities. The objective was to connect with the Peace Corps network through the Rotary clubs to explore what has been done in the past and where Rotary and the Peace Corps can connect for good in the future. So I think Charlie's got a slide that talks about making connections. It's very simple. We've been trying to get this message through to our own clubs throughout the district in terms of what they do locally. And we're hoping that we can encourage every single Peace Corps volunteer who has a camera to do this. Because telling our Rotary story and telling our Peace Corps story is really quite simple. You just need to take a picture, write a story, send it in to someone who will share it with your Peace Corps and with your own Peace Corps and Rotary connections, and then repeat the process as often as possible. Because together, Peace Corps and Rotary can light up the fire of Rotary and the Peace Corps through service throughout the world, thereby creating hope in the world where we desperately need it. Thanks.
Thanks, Ellen. That's great. That's thank you. That's a good explanation there. One of the things that I would like to share at this point is, you know, the your project in the Dominican Republic and other collaborative projects that we do from Partnering for Peace, or as you explained, this project was actually done before Partnering for Peace. And it really kind of paints a picture of exactly what is happening. You have a US-based Rotary Club making a connection with a Peace Corps volunteer, and somehow, I'm not sure how it happened, but you then connected with that club in the Dominican Republic. And so there are three pieces there that have to meet and collaborate and work together. Isn't that true?
Well, it is true, Alan. I'm glad you brought that up, because when Sarah first called, she said, well, what do I do about this? And I said, the most important thing you need to do is to find a local Rotary club in the country And of course, at the time, there weren't any ways to make that happen through the Peace Corps, really. We didn't have that connection. But I said, that's, one of the things from being a young is that we'd make donations to Rotary. And sometimes those donations filter to parts of the world where you can make a difference. So I said, that a Rotary Club, if you get mom involved and the Rotary Foundation involved, there's where I actually had given her Paul Harris pin, which I have on myself. We had made our children Paul Harris Fellows when they went to college. I know this isn't in my script, but I basically told her to wear the pin to the Pimentel Rotary Club. And I said, they will know that pin has dollars behind it. So the rest is sort of history. She talked to the club club talked to its district. The club then got back to me, and one thing led to another, and we ended up with a large grant. So it's pretty cool.
That's what it's all about, collaborating in that way. So now we have Charlie, who explained how he got involved with Peace Corps after he was a Rotarian. You are a Rotarian who, through your daughter, got involved with Peace Corps. I just went to Peace Corps directly out of college. I'm one of those many early volunteers, and that's how we did it. I would now like to introduce our audience to my good friend Caroline Mackenzie, who, well, I'll let her explain how she got into Peace Corps and then Rotary. So, Caroline, take it away.
I lived overseas in my married life for 10 years, and I always wanted to be an ambassador, but I never passed the diplomatic part of the foreign service test because I cannot say a lot and say nothing. I know geography, I know about the world, but my mouth is an open book. So I become a single person, and I end up working in cancer grants in Southern Cal and classic California. And I lived in San Diego, and I did a 90-mile commute every day to City of Hope in Pasadena. And eventually I ended up doing a one-way up Monday, come home Thursday, long distance remote working. Well, the interesting thing is that if any of you know California traffic, the traffic can be horrible. It can be either 90 miles and 90 minutes or 90 miles and 6.5 hours. And this was one day coming home on a Thursday, 6.5 hours. And there are no bathrooms on the LA freeway between Pasadena and San Diego. And I listened to public broadcasting. And at this time, I am 61 years of age. So on the public broadcasting station in the car, Peace Corps had actually marketed and had a PSA. They were looking for senior volunteers to join the Peace Corps. And this is something I really wish the Peace Corps would bring the ad back, because I sat there in the car stuck in traffic going, I can do this. I've lived overseas 10 years. I speak 3 languages. And I wouldn't have to drive expletive car. So I went home, I vented, I applied, and then 2 days later went back to my 90-mile commute. But 6 months later, I got a call from Peace Corps, and I was asked for an interview and became one of the last era. In 2009, I was asked to go to Ukraine. And this was the last real era of, this is where you're going, this is what you're doing. So in March of 2010, I went to Ukraine. I served in Luhansk, which is now the battle zone that you probably all see. Our training city was Chernihiv. It is now gone. Basically, the 385,000 people that lived in the city and where we trained, everything we know is gone. It was 2.5 years of definitely the toughest job you will ever love. And in the process of I was assigned to work with people with disabilities, which you do not want to be disabled in the post-Soviet world. And while I was in Luhansk, and I thought my group would like to get grants, I realized that Rotary, even though I was not a Rotary member, there was a Rotary in Kiev, and maybe I could get a grant from the Rotary in Kiev and maybe help my group out. Well, there were interesting things I learned about Ukrainians and trying to get grants. And meanwhile, the grant never materialized, but my group to this day still gets funding from a group in Washington, D.C. And for that, I am internally proud. So I come home from Ukraine in 2012. California is burning up, it's drying up, and I am fortunate to have a house in Hawaii. I come to Hawaii and it's nice. My allergies are happy. It's not burning up. I don't know anybody, but we can solve problems. So I ended up moving to Hawaii to my house permanently in 2014. My son moved to Maui. He does not have to live next door to his mother. Everybody's happy. I meet the Peace Corps crowd here in Hawaii. And yes, all of a sudden I get into projects. And wouldn't you like to be our secretary, Caroline? We need help. I become the secretary, and before I knew it, in 2016, I became the boss lady. And I am still the boss lady for the Returned Peace Corps group here in Hawaii, which brings me to Alan, who came in from Hilo. And I was desperate for volunteers who I thought might take my job. And Alan met me, and we've been friends ever since. And Charlie talked about having his arm twisted doing certain things. Well, Alan told me about Rotary, and I should maybe think about this. And he twisted my arm for probably 3 years. And finally, this past year, I joined Rotary because, yes, as Ellen said on her slide, there are so many things that we do together. And I have made my sort of niche here as the boss lady for the return group in Hawaii to serve Peace Corps volunteers serving overseas. And happily, we have 5 right now from Hawaii back Africa to South America and Jamaica. So we have done our grants. And when you look at what we can do together, little small service projects meeting both sides. We just had a big clearing, worked at a community clearinghouse sorting clothing that my Rotary friends came, but it was Peace Corps initiated. And I've gone and helped clean schools and some of your interact programs at some of the high schools. So for me, the networking that I see between Peace Corps and Rotary is a given. It's good that we do the same thing. The hardest part, I think Charlie was mentioning, is how do you find potential Rotarians or Peace Corps volunteers? And that's a networking thing. That's something that I try and do. I try and network. And I went to a Rotary walk Saturday morning, and there were lovely ladies, found out I was in Peace Corps, and then they learned that they didn't have to be a young person anymore. They could actually do it over the age of 60 or 70 or 80. And I am finding that my little networking mouth, I can find Peace Corps potential volunteers. And now that I'm learning about Rotary, it's an easy way to talk to kids about the value of Rotary. And young kids, it's not just an old white guy network anymore. No offense, not to be politically incorrect, but young kids overseas, there's a wealth of wealth and a wealth of knowledge between both organizations. And with that, I think that's my 5 minutes, Alan.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Now, we'll move on now to a different area. As we all know, the Peace Corps is a federal entity, and therefore, like all federal entities, we're always worried about the government approving our budget, making sure that we do have enough money to do what we want to do. And so Peace Corps is always faced with the problem every year, trying to figure out how much is needed in order to continue our Peace Corps work and whether we can convince Congress to actually do that. Now, we do have the National Peace Corps Association in Washington, and it's an organization that basically brings all of Peace Corps together because it brings in those who served in the Peace Corps, especially through affiliate groups. And so there are country affiliate groups like Friends of Afghanistan. There are area affiliates like the Returned Peace Corps Volunteers of Colorado. And we're always, every year, concerned, or we should be concerned about whether Peace Corps, the organization Peace Corps, has sufficient funds to carry on. Because let's face it, if Peace Corps weren't there, the work that we want to do in Partnering for Peace, working with Rotary, won't happen. So I asked Jonathan Pearson, our next speaker, to tell us a little bit about that issue there. And so Jonathan is with the advocacy at NPCA, and he is a Returned Peace Corps volunteer himself. So Jonathan, tell us a little bit about what's happening at NPC and what is happening in terms of advocacy work.
Well, thank you, Alan, and good evening or good day, everyone. I'm Jonathan Pearson, Advocacy Director for National Peace Corps Association. I was a volunteer in the Federated States of Micronesia, and I just want to applaud everyone for your service in so many ways, domestically, internationally, and special note that last year in 2022, Partnering for Peace was one of the co-recipients, along with the RPCV Alliance for Ukraine and the Friends of Moldova, of NPCA's Lorette Miller-Rupe Award for outstanding work by NPCA affiliate groups. So that's a credit to the work that you all are doing. What I wanted to take a moment to talk about is just advocacy and how you can help. And I've had the good fortune of speaking in front of a couple of Rotary clubs in the past, and I know there's talk about trying to do that amongst the Partnering for Peace groups. So I wanted to encourage that to happen. I'm going to share my screen and just go through a couple of quick things. The first thing is that the Peace Corps is back. They were removed from all countries because of the COVID pandemic, and there was really an existential concern about Peace Corps' future. But the volunteers are continuing to return. There are now more than 2,000 Peace Corps volunteers and trainees back in 57 countries. And just this past week, there is one member of Congress currently who served as a Peace Corps volunteer. It's John Garamendi. He represents Northern California in the Congress. He served in Ethiopia. And he spoke at our annual virtual conference just this past week. And one of the things that he conveyed to us is we are the voice of the Peace Corps. And that is not just Returned Peace Corps volunteers, but Peace Corps moms and other friends and family members and supporters of the Peace Corps. And that's critically important. And part of our agenda right now comes down to two key things. There's a piece of legislation called the Peace Corps Reauthorization Act, which almost passed last year. We're hoping that it can pass this year. But it's going to take a lot of work. And then also, as Alan mentioned, the annual appropriation. There is a difference emerging between the United States Senate and the House of Representatives that amounts to about a $40 to $50 million difference in how much funding the Peace Corps will get next year. So we are asking our advocates to urge Congress to support no less than the Senate recommendation of $448 million for the Peace Corps for the next fiscal year. So what we are doing is we are in the midst of what we call our summer period with activities all around the nation during August, September, and even into October. And that includes meetings with members of Congress, other types of gatherings. And in closing, I would just say this. I will put my email in the chat, and we'd love it if you're planning to speak before a local Rotary Club about your Peace Corps experience, or if you're a Rotary Club looking for a returned Peace Corps volunteer. What we'd love to have you do is incorporate a couple of small, brief talking points about Peace Corps in your presentation. And I'd be happy to work with you on that. And with that, I will say thank you for having me. I'll put my chat again, my name in the chat. And thank you very much, Alan.
Oh, sorry. I had trouble unmuting myself. One of the takeaways, I hope, those of you who are tuned in today, is that when I visited the advocacy committee's meetings that Jonathan obviously heads up, we were all Peace Corps volunteers. I think I can safely say maybe one or two of us were also Rotarians. And it struck me, because I was already a part of Partnering for Peace, that really Rotarians can also help with this effort. I mean, you don't have to be a Peace Corps volunteer to write to your congressman, your senator, to say you support Peace Corps. And so I hope that those of us who are Rotarians also, that we will go back to our Rotary clubs and let them know that Peace Corps is still around. Because I have heard someone has asked me before, you mean the Peace Corps is still around? Yeah, we are. And as I said before, you don't have to be a Peace Corps volunteer to ask for Congress to keep Peace Corps alive and well. I'd like to, at this point, go back to Ellen and have her speak about, what was it, Ellen? Tell me. I lost my train of thought there.
We're going to just kind of pivot a little bit to some of the things that we're trying to do together, and how we do it. I don't know if you add up all the, I guess kind of, I'm a bit of a data nerd, but Rotary International and the United States Peace Corps have a combined history of service of over 180 years. And they now work closely together to improve the lives of millions throughout the world through Partnering for Peace. What we don't realize is the incredible scope of possibilities we have for meeting together, working together, and exploring new ways to serve, not only throughout the world, but throughout the United States, with Rotarians learning about the Peace Corps during annual Rotary district conferences, where information booths can be set up to show what service projects are in progress, and even talk about some of the possibilities that we might want to showcase based on what we know. Often members from Partnering for Peace, such as Alan, set up displays to showcase the Partnering for Peace partnership. And Partnering for Peace also participates in outreach during international conventions, US zone meetings. We have one coming up in Chicago, and we try to spread the word as widely as possible about collaborative efforts. Alan, I'm going to pivot back over to you, because you've got a slide that shows what you tend to drag with you in your suitcase. I don't know where you put it, but you know, you've created some materials. We've got lots of materials that we can share, pamphlets, you name it. Take it away, Alan.
Right. Sure. You know, you say putting it in my suitcase. Think about this. Because I live here in the islands. I mean, that's really this is a poster that I put together. I actually started it last year, and then modified it this year for 2023. But what happens is at our Rotary district conferences, and for Hawaii, the Rotary District 5000 is the entire state of Hawaii. And we have a place within the conference facilities that we call the House of Friendship. And it's a perfect place for us as individual clubs or parts of clubs, satellite clubs, to show off what we have done in the past. And so it's really like a large exhibition hall. So I set up this board here and just have in the middle of the House of Friendship. And we have all the information that you see here, the various pages that I mounted onto that board. Everything is there. Of course, you have Rotary and Peace Corps side by side. In the middle panel toward the bottom, the yellow bordered papers, that's a list of all the different projects that Partnering for Peace knows about, at least. I'm sure there are more, but these are all collaborative projects where Rotary has joined with Peace Corps volunteers and completed a project overseas. In the bottom left and the bottom right, you see those 6 narrow pages there. They are what I cut up from a brochure, a trifold brochure, and we handed out brochures like the ones that you see at the bottom of the photo there. And so we hand them out, and it goes very, very quickly because there are a number of people who just forgot or just weren't aware that Peace Corps exists. And of course, we started at that time that we had this district conference in May. We already knew that we were actually planning this Rotary Peace Corps week. And so the information you can see is up there in the top right corner. And all of you who signed up for it, you've of course been sent emails and however other way you found out about this. But this particular exhibit, this trifold board here, is not that large. It's 3 feet high. And when you spread out the 2 sides there, it comes to 4 feet. So just imagine I had to keep it from folding or whatever. So I had to put together a solid piece of plywood and wrap it up in it so that it wouldn't be bent, because I had to check it in to luggage. But for most of you, it's easy for you to just put it in your car and just take it along. So this is an example of the things that we can do in taking the information to the public. And there are a lot of Rotarians in our district now who learned about Peace Corps and what we are doing, how we are continuing on our service above self. Whatever we started in the Peace Corps while we were serving, and it just continues on after. Or in some cases, we have some of our volunteers who join after. And I've been with Caroline when she's spoken about her service in the Ukraine, and Rotarians are curious about it, and they have asked us, how do we go about joining the Peace Corps after? we retire. At this point, what I'd like to do is to just move into the Q&A session. I'm sure there are a number of questions in our chat box, I guess. Charlie, can you tell us, are there questions from the audience?
There is one so far. Hopefully we'll get a few more to come in. Let me scan back above. This is from Kate Van Slyke to everyone. Alan, could you please elaborate on what Peace Corps volunteers might photograph and write a story about? Would they be sending it to a Rotary Club in hopes of finding support? And then repeating this practice would keep the Rotary members of the club informed of project progress.
What I replied back to Kate, I thought I was supposed to do this with a direct message, so I did, but
Good to share with everyone. Yeah.
Sure.
Each Peace Corps volunteer assesses the needs of the communities in which they serve. In the same way that before a Rotary Club does a global grant, they have to do a community needs assessment to make sure that the need is valid and that it's something that Rotary would cover. And I said, I think just working with the needs and taking pictures of the before, after, and process of helping helps to share what is needed and possibly get Rotarians interested in helping by supporting the project, not necessarily grants, but perhaps through the international service chairs, maybe having a project team going to help that area. You know, we have our district's international service chair happens to be in my club, and we're talking about the sorts of things that possibly we could be doing as a club overseas. So you don't know, until you ask what the needs are, and once you figure out what the needs are, you might be able to find together a way to fix them. So that's
Kate also asked that might we also partner with AmeriCorps volunteers as well? I would say yes. Any partnership, partnerships are good.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting that particular question came up. We here in Hawaii have only recently gotten a full-time recruiter for Peace Corps, shall we say, the Peace Corps organization. And Caroline and I just met her, and we learned that she served in AmeriCorps, and she's very familiar with that. And I'm sure there are other recruiters like her whose background is really AmeriCorps and can answer the question, because AmeriCorps and Peace Corps are both under the roof of Peace Corps. And so why not? I saw a question that came up, that popped up on my screen here. Charlie, do you have that?
Well, I've got two possible here. First, Jonathan McRoberts has his hand up, and also Cal Mann wanted to make a comment or two. Jonathan, do you want to go first?
Yes, just a quick question. You mentioned about there being a problem with connecting for some government reason, the Peace Corps and Rotary early on. And it's a simple question. In the training program, couldn't the Peace Corps trainers mention that you might want to find out what service clubs are in your hometown that have international connections with service clubs overseas, and then simply encourage them when they get to their post to find out if they are near or posted near someplace where there are some of these service clubs. I'm a Rotarian and a Lion, and they both have international clubs. And God, I would have loved that. I recently went back to Nepal where I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and there were no Rotary clubs there then, but there's a very dynamic one now. It would have been extremely helpful because they're all businessmen in the community. I could have done a lot more with that connection. So if I would even have thought of it as a possibility. And that's not no sharing of names or anything. It's just a simple thing.
Jonathan, I think you're on the right track. There's so much that we could be doing on the front end to get connecting with volunteers, and how do we do it? But also in country, like if a Peace Corps volunteer has a project, can they connect with the local Rotary Club? Or the other possibility is just to do a simple search at Rotary International to look at who's the Peace Corps Club back in their at home that they didn't connect with before they went overseas, and go back to them and tell them I've got a small project. I was just going through Dominica in the Lesser Antilles and stopped in the Peace Corps office, and I mentioned that to them, and they were like, "We didn't know that." It's like, why didn't you know that? It's like, that's so much about the partnership is like getting people just to know what's available to them out there, and that's in so many ways is the biggest challenge. There was someone else, I think. Fred, I see you.
Could I jump in on
Oh,
that?
yeah, Cal.
Cal,
Briefly.
sorry.
So it is true. First of all, Cal, I am a returned Peace Corps volunteer and also a Rotarian, and I also spent a year working for Peace Corps at headquarters in the response area. It is true that Peace Corps cannot share the name of the contact information of invitees, that is, people who are slated to go off to Peace Corps. However, recruiters can share local Rotarian contacts with those Peace Corps invitees and can provide them with some reasons for why they might reach out to a local Rotary Club before they leave. One of the things, as those of us who are Peace Corps volunteer veterans, we know that process of getting ready to go, which is anywhere between 6 and 9 months, can be kind of stressful. And there's a lot you need to do to get prepared. And one of the things that can be helpful is to have the support and the encouragement of a local Rotary Club and their members. So I think one thing that clubs can do is to start a relationship with their local recruiter and make sure that recruiter has contact information for your club, so that if there's an invitee or even an applicant from their area, that they can be contacted by that invitee and can get support for them in the process of their application or in the process of their getting ready to go off to service.
Thanks, Cal. You certainly have a background in this. Sal did have some good experiences as a Peace Corps volunteer, as a Rotarian in country while he was in service. So he's pretty darn familiar with making those connections. I would challenge all of you too to think about, what can I do in my particular Rotary Club in my district to find a Peace Corps recruiter and get with them and meet them and make them your friend, invite them to do presentations at your Rotary clubs, and then also ask them, that recruiter, can you please help connect us to the Peace Corps volunteers that are going out in our community? They can't share the names, but they can ask the recruit to contact the local Rotary Club or help to make the connection. I would also, in the chat, it was up above and I missed this, Sia Barbara Camaras said, you mentioned that there was a directory of Rotary groups, I think. Is that available to assist us in identifying Rotary and its communities? Yes, go to rotary.org, and right on the homepage is find a club. All you have to do is put in your zip code or your city, and it will tell you where your local Rotary clubs are.
Any more questions, comments?
Fred's got his hand up. He's had it up for a bit.
Oh.
Fred?
Yes, I'm wondering, and I'm not sure whether it was Charlie or Alan who mentioned this, but the notion of starting a satellite club for younger people or something like that, and that was interesting to me because I find that one of the difficulties in my club is that the dues structure is such that maybe a lot of RPCVs don't feel like they can afford to join the club because of that. Many of them starting out in their careers as opposed to older folks who have established themselves. So I was just wondering if you could explain a little bit more about the satellite club that was established for younger people, as I understood your comment.
Well, I would say for younger people largely, but not necessarily. I would say a lot of the people that are in our satellite group are probably at least in their 40s. They had served in the past, and to your point, it's like to them the cost of a Rotary Club dues was what made it less interesting for them to become involved. But what we did is we established a different dues rate for our satellite group. So typically our club dues membership is like $125 a quarter. We set it up at $50 a quarter. And with that, we don't lose anything in terms of cost per member. But what we do get is we get a lot of energy that comes into the club, because having a lot of Returned Peace Corps volunteers in your club can really energize your club and energize your service projects. So we kind of consider that a win-win. You know, we're not losing any money by dropping the dues for them, but we get an added benefit.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a quick comment.
Ellen, yeah.
There's not only satellite clubs, but there are different club models out there. Ours is a club model that meets once a month. We meet virtually most of the time. When we're not meeting virtually, we're having a party. But our due structure is very, very, very inexpensive, and we drive basically to service projects and funding the Rotary Foundation as opposed to filling our tummies. So we tend to do things a little bit differently. And there are many, many different types of clubs out there now that are available for not only young people, but older people who choose to keep their money in their pockets or make donations with it.
Thanks, Alan.
Absolutely. You know, we talked about it earlier somewhat. One of the things that I think all of us can do as RPCVs, and I think most of you are, it's so easy for you to volunteer yourself to speak at a Rotary Club. Mm-hmm. Because once they know the country that you served in, it really doesn't matter. You don't have to be one who served in a country that's in the news, just any country. I mean, really and truly, Rotarians in their weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings now, they really do have a hard time finding speakers often. And so it's wonderful when you, as a volunteer, say, I can do a short, and the Rotary talks are very short. I mean, our club limits it to 20 minutes. And so it's not like you're gonna have to go through a lot of work in order to talk about your Peace Corps experience. I mean, it's very easy, really. I mean, as I said, you know, I went along with Caroline when Ukraine became the big thing to talk about. I mean, her talking about her service was perfect.
Carolyn, you've got your hand up. You're on mute.
Yeah, two things. Paul Rutter there, picture Peace Corps invitee. You had some questions about your nerves and you're on your way very soon. I would, depending upon what part of the country where you live, find a Returned Peace Corps group ASAP. And if you want, tell me your state in the chat and I can look it up and give it back to you. Because we are a source to help you get ready to go. And there are many of us that are older volunteers now that can tell you, oh, don't worry, where I was in Ukraine, I was totally respected. It was fascinating. I did not have to eat cabbage the entire 2.5 years I was there. The food was awesome. It was cold. It was fascinating to be in a country where it was -20 for 5 months. And these are things you may need to find out or want to find out before you really punch out. And the other thing is, as Cal was mentioning, Returned Peace Corps Volunteers of Hawaii, I ended up putting our university recruiters on our board because they tell me who's going where. And sometimes the Peace Corps doesn't quite tell me who's been accepted from Hawaii, where a lot of the kids, and now that we have a real recruiter as well as our university recruiters, they stay on top because we raise money for our Peace Corps volunteers overseas. We have grants and we also have care packages. And most of the care packages are what the kids want. And we've learned what to stuff in an international priority box for the equivalent of $250. And that goes a long way. And then the gal that asked about what kinds of photos, I did a water grant in Ukraine to clean up the disabled, the bathrooms that were at my work office were not for people with disabilities at all. So I took pictures of the horrible facilities, sent it off for a water grant, and we got the money and we cleaned up the bathrooms so that my friends in wheelchairs could actually use the facilities. So it's like, take lots of pictures, use your head, call, find a group where you're living, and meet all your recruiters, okay? Look at your universities in your area. You'll probably find a Peace Corps recruiter there.
Any other comments? Now, I just noticed Ted Adams from Peace Corps is with us. Ted, would you
I might
like
also
to
add-
add a comment?
Kerry Golden, his counterpart at RI, who's the partnership lead, they're the two people we've been meeting with for years, once a month. Maybe between the two of them, they might have a comment or two.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. It's great. It's so inspiring to hear these stories. This has already been a great week, last night and tonight. Yeah, I think I just second and third and fourth that Partnering for Peace has really made this relationship more than a piece of paper, but rather they've been boots on the ground and really trying to connect what I think is kind of this constellation of of constellation of resources, right, along this kind of lifelong path of service that both Rotary and Peace Corps take. So you have this amazing National Peace Corps Association with all these affiliate groups organized by country, by issue area, by geography. You've got Partnering for Peace trying to connect Rotary and Peace Corps together. Peace Corps itself in its Office of Third Goal has a number of resources where you can, a global connections program where your club could actually say, hey, we would love to have a speaker or a Peace Corps volunteer matched up with the club. So that's another route. But you've mentioned several tonight of where you can tap into some of these resources. And I think what Carrie and I have been trying to do is, right, connect the dots wherever we can and try to do it as close to the ground as possible. And this is just great testimony to, Alan's, just how organic it's been and how you've done it. I think they're great examples you're lifting up. So I think whether it's overseas or whether it's wherever it is in the kind of cycle of the volunteer, from recruitment to in-country service to when they come back home, I think that's kind of the secret sauce is in connecting as close to the ground, finding alignment with what your club is doing and what that Peace Corps, either the RPCV is interested in, or the Returned Peace Corps volunteer is interested in, or what that post, that country might be focused on. Not all Peace Corps countries do the exact same sectors. So it's kind of doing some of that homework. But it doesn't have to be the overseas. It could be also, what your club is going to be most aligned with working on and what issue area. So just really encouraged by this conversation, and Carrie and I are here to help wherever we can.
Yeah. Thank you, Ted. Carrie, do you have a comment for us? She might have stepped away. Carrie, are you there?
Alan, could I just throw one thing in here too, just on this topic, kind of building on something that Ted just said, and that is that Peace Corps volunteers, among the things that they need to do is something called third goal. And what that is to be sharing their experience in Peace Corps with their friends and their families back in the States. And by establishing a connection with a Rotary Club, they can start to build that group of people that they're communicating with about their experience. And so reaching out and establishing that connection before they go is the beginning of their third goal. And the other thing is just probably something important for people who don't know what the Peace Corps experience is, or maybe some of the details of Peace Corps. Peace Corps sends a certain number of volunteers out. Not 100% of them make it the full service, whether it's a year or 2 years. And I would suggest that more of them would be staying longer if they had more support from back home. They may get support from their family, they may not. Their friends may or may not be supportive, but Rotarians could be supportive. And I think you could help increase the likelihood that they stay and increase the likelihood that they're effective. And that's a really important way that Rotarians can help Peace Corps volunteers.
Very good point, Cal. As I recall, Cal, isn't it true you were actually a Rotarian first, and then you joined the Peace Corps later, and that's how you got involved in. I mean, you serve on our board, so is that true?
Yes, that is correct. I had been in Rotary for 15 years before I went off to Peace Corps. And my experience in Rotary was fantastic preparation for being a Peace Corps volunteer, and vice versa. I think that my Peace Corps experience has greatly enhanced my ability to serve in Rotary and in this partnership.
Yeah, I think your experience speaks for exactly that. You know, that if you have that relationship with a Rotary Club before you go out, that is extremely helpful. Yeah, you have somebody to talk to, someone to share with, and because especially when you go overseas, things happen, right? Things are different there, and we all know, those of us who served, it's quite different when you go out there, and things are not like they are in the USA. So yeah. Fred, did you have a comment before we close? We're getting up to the witching hour here.
If I may, and Ted does direct this question to Ted, and he may or may not be able to answer this question at this point, but one of the difficulties that I think that I've noticed, and we're all sort of hitting around and talking, and some of us have more difficulty than others, is identifying people in the community, in our communities, who are either serving in the Peace Corps or about to go into the Peace Corps. Now, I understand the Peace Corps privacy concerns and how the Peace Corps does not want to divulge the names of these individuals or where they're going. However, I wouldn't think there'd be any prohibition, and you sort of hit on this, Ted, to some degree, to making it part of Peace Corps training, telling them that the Rotary clubs in their hometowns are potential resources for them once they reach their end country, and that it might not be a bad idea to keep that in mind and to figure out a way to contact them. Is there some prescription that would keep Peace Corps from doing something like that?
No, it's a great point. I think what we are trying to, there's many points along this kind of journey, right? From as you enter into the recruitment pipeline and your application and departure and training and service. And so it's finding those points where we can bring up partners like Rotary. So we actually are working on getting some language in some of the departure materials that will let volunteers know, or invitees as we call them before they're officially sworn in, let them know about some of these resources. It might be as simple as, a link to the, find a Rotary Club when you're in your site. It's because there's just so much that a volunteer is getting hit with when they start. There's just a flood of information, right? So you're trying to find those right spots along the way when you can introduce partners like Rotary. So yes, that's a real priority for Carrie and I to get some of that language. We're doing tomorrow, actually. Well, one of our sessions has invited a lot of our posts and post staff to come and learn about Rotary. So that's also kind of an ongoing education process for us. But then it's also when volunteers pivot and are planning to return home, in the close of service is what we call it in our world. We'll have some more information about Rotary, other partners too, but Rotary, to consider Rotary when they return. So that's what we're kind of our priority for the next year is to do that. But we should still keep working this angle where, where recruiters are hosting departure parties, or, connecting with those local recruiters who have a good sense of, where the volunteers from their states or their region, when they're going and who's going. So that's a great, I think for Rotary clubs in the US, that's a really great resource, is to really build that relationship with the recruiter, because they're going to be able to likely get the word to those invitees. That's kind of the first touch when they're still in the US. Does that help?
Yes, that's excellent. So, I was thinking, for example, that, I'm sure there are many Rotary clubs that would say, okay, we're going to have an open house, and the Rotary Club doesn't need to know the names of the individuals if the Peace Corps will tell them that the Rotary Club is having an open house. That would, you might have a really strong connection there where people would show up and make the connection with the local Rotary Club.
Well, I know another thing, and Charlie, I'm going to pivot back to Colorado. I often pivot to Colorado because they've got so much great energy, and we're such a source for this partnership. But that strong relationship with the RPCVs of Colorado, I think also helps you keep a pulse on on both Returned Peace Corps volunteers and those who are going out, because usually the folks that are the applicants are talking with the Returned Peace Corps volunteers. They kind of find each other. So that's another place, I think, stateside that you can kind of connect with those folks who are going to be going out as volunteers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great way to close. We are definitely a couple minutes over time here. Thank you very much. Or as they say in Hawaii, mahalo for joining us today. I thought it was a very interesting session here, especially all these questions and answers. That just so much going on, new ideas that I don't know. Charlie's probably been through all these ideas, but who knows? We'll see. We'll take some of this stuff back to the board of Partnering for Peace, and we certainly can have another Rotary Peace Corps week next year, about the same time. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next year.
Alan, let me just mention one thing really quickly.
Okay.
Don't want people to forget tomorrow's session. They barely have to go to bed because it starts at 9 o'clock in the morning. And it is all about connecting in-country clubs and Peace Corps posts. So this is going to be some good examples And again, it starts at 9 o'clock. And you do need to register for each session, although obviously it's just a matter of signing up and making sure you get the link. But if you haven't done so, that's tomorrow, Thursday, with successful examples of joint Rotary Peace Corps projects. And that's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday. This is all Eastern time, of course. And then Friday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon is Rotary Peace Corps, a global force for peace, talking about Rotary action groups and a number of e-clubs and peace builder clubs, a number of other types of clubs that are more directly oriented toward peace that we have not talked about yet. So there's plenty left to do, and I hope maybe you can attend the sessions. If you can't, remember that the sessions are recorded and that you can find them on the website. So thank you, Alan.
And thank you for reminding me. I forgot about that. I was supposed to do that. Juliet, do you have a comment? Oh,
I don't. I was just thank you for the session. I've attended both nights of the sessions. I'm not a Peace Corps volunteer, but I'm a Rotarian and a past district governor. And I'm learning a lot about, potential relationships we can build here. So thank you.
and new member. Remember, Returned Peace Corps volunteers are a great source for new members for Rotary.
Older
Thank
people
you.
volunteer too.
What was that, Paul?
Older people can volunteer too, like past
Oh.
distributors.
Yeah, as,
I'm
as we
65
saw
and getting ready to go.
yeah,
Good.
I mean, yeah,
All right.
great.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you very much, and we'll see you again.
Thank you.